And welcome back to Indianapolis this week. We're joined now by our political insiders, Lara Beck for the Democrats and the former executive director of the Marion County Republicans, Joey Fox, joining us as well, a lobbyist at the State House. And quickly listen, what's that? The sound of silence because Abdul is not here today.
It's because I said his ego was a pre-existing.
Did
you chase him away?
He's watching right now.
I ran him off.
Let's talk about. Let's jump to Washington and talk about the Republican health care bill now on the table so far. The president's behind it, Republican leadership behind it in Washington. Lara, at this point, what is invested when it comes to political capital, especially for the president and for Republican leadership?
Well, there's a lot invested in it right now because really it's not terribly popular among folks outside of Republican leadership and outside of President Trump and his administration. So they're going to have to expend a lot of political capital on getting this through the House, on reaching out to conservative networks that have come out and said they're not supportive of it, on reaching out with Medicaid governors that supported Medicaid expansion, Democrat and Republican, and frankly their own constituents, because some of the initial numbers that are starting to come in from this health care proposal is that it's going to hurt the very people who voted for Trump. And so you're going to be putting yourself out there with about a year and a half until midterms, pushing this so hard, and it really could come back to bite you, just like Obamacare did to President Obama.
Joey, they came out of the gate hot and heavy with this thing, a kind of neck-breaking speed the first few days, but this isn't a finished product necessarily.
It's not, and in rebuttal to you, Laura, what's really unpopular is Obamacare, so much so that Donald Trump is now President of the United States based largely on a promise to repeal and replace Obamacare, and that's exactly what process has started. To your point, Jason, this is step one, a released bill that everyone can read at readthebill.gop in a transparent process. I think we're over 30 hours of committee hearings in, maybe close to 40 hours of committee hearings in now. We're going to continue on this process. Republicans have differences of opinion on this, and that's okay. We're going to have a transparent process to work through this. We've got a long way to go to get to a finished bill, but this is about keeping a campaign promise to repeal and replace Obamacare, and that process has started.
We heard from Senator Donnelly earlier in the program talking about rather acknowledging there are problems with the Affordable Care Act, something that he wants to work on in a bipartisan way with Republicans. When this seemed to come together really last weekend, it seemed like Republicans were behind closed doors. They came up with their own plan. It now counters the Affordable Care Act, and we're back to these kind of two divided policies.
I find it fascinating that Senator Donnelly would like this to be a bipartisan process. I wonder where he was in 2010 when the Democrats passed this Affordable Care Act on party line votes. Nancy Pelosi walked out to a podium and said, we'll find out what's in the bill after we pass it.
After all this, Laura, can they come together?
Part of the reason, though, I think for the Republicans, the challenge is that they have used it as their punching bag. They've used it, and now, as Donald Trump said, healthcare is really complicated. Who knew? I mean, they tried to repeal Obamacare, what, 60 plus times? Maybe. I think that's what the number is. And so now they own this. And so if it does not meet up to the standards and to what people expect it to be, they're going to have to own that as they come into the midterms. And we all know that Donald Trump right now appears to be fairly Teflon with some folks. But when it starts really chipping away at his base and their very quality of life and all these manufacturing jobs he's promised don't come back, it's really going to pinch them harder than what folks probably previously expected.
The president touts himself as a deal maker. What needs to go on behind closed doors or out in the public at this point to really get the entire party on board with either this bill or whatever comes in the wake of it?
I actually will give Laura credit for bringing up a great point, and that is there's got to be some balance here.
See, he's so much better than Abdul already, Laura.
Usually I've already rolled my eyes at Abdul. Yeah, this is a whole new day for me.
Yes, this bill or a bill on repealing and replacing Obamacare has got to pass through Congress and get signed by the president, but it also has to be acceptable to the governors who are going to sit on the front lines.
Right.
And in Indiana,
many
we've got
are up for election next year.
Who will be up for election? Who could be up for election? Yeah. But in Indiana, we have an incredible program, the Healthy Indiana Plan 2.0. Governor Holcomb and his team have submitted a waiver request for the next iteration of this that brings even more consumer-driven options into the fold. And so I think we've got a long way to go in balancing congressional Republicans, gubernatorial Republicans to get everybody on board to have a product that works in good policy.
Quickly, Joey, is the uncertainty that surrounds this bill and whatever comes from it, is that a better alternative to the Affordable Care Act and HIP 2.0 here in Indiana at this point?
I think legislative processes are ambiguous sometimes, right? It takes a while to get things out there. The Democrats in 2010 put a bill out, voted on it, and Nancy Pelosi said, we'll figure out what's in it after we pass it. We now have a transparent process that we can work through to figure out great policy at the end of the day. And I'll note one more time that you can read the whole bill at readthebill.gop.
Filibustered like Abdul champion. Joey, Lara, thanks for being here. Follow us on Twitter right now at Indy This Week.